everybody, and welcome to Dive into Young Politics with Leah and Zahara. We're very excited to see you guys this week after a little bit of a hiatus last weekend while we were in Cincinnati at the Young Dems of America convention. And building on that vibe of the Young Dems of America convention, today we have Carrie McFadden with us, and she was our convention chair, actually. She was the brave one that led the whole 4-day convention. It's not easy to control a General Assembly body of people from all over the country. So
no, but she did a wonderful job with that.
Yeah, so we're very excited to have Carrie joining us today. We're going to get to talk a little bit about some things we haven't covered today, some national politics, some international stuff. What is YDA, what it means to be a part of it. So if you want to get started, Carrie, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to everyone and just tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, so my name is Carrie McFadden. I was the convention chair for YDA Cincy, which, as stated, was a bit of a it was a fun, unique task, which involved a lot of me telling people to be quiet. So I apologize. But I was also the executive vice president of the Young Democrats of America this last 2-year term. I have been involved in Young Dems of America since 2013. And before and during that, I've also just been involved at the state and local levels of Young Democrats. So I've been involved in some form of Young Democrats since I was 20, and I'm now 34. So it's been a while.
Okay. Well, it's
dedication.
Yeah, exactly. So
and now I'm graduating.
Oh, congratulations.
Congrats.
Thank you.
So, I mean, you've been involved, as you said, for a long time, but how did you first get started or involved in politics?
So I grew up in a town called Santa Cruz in California, which is a very progressive place. It was known for being a very big source of activism during the 60s, similar to San Francisco, where I live now. It's basically known as sort of being a hippie town. We were actually featured on The Daily Show when I was in high school because we were the first local city council to oppose the invasion of Iraq. And The Daily Show was sort of like kind of making fun of us because obviously it's a city council, but that's just sort of the sort of like environment I grew up in, which I loved. And my dad was in a union. He was a bus driver. So growing up, my dad was very involved in the United Transportation Union, UTU, and SEIU. And then when I got a little older, he was involved with the Teamsters. So I grew up in a very like union household. I grew up like I loved going to like union meetings with my dad. I really enjoyed like stuffing envelopes and, putting stamps on things. And the first time I went precinct walking was just to do a lit drop with my dad to support some local candidates. And I think I was about 10 or 11. And I thought it was just the most fun thing to do, to just like go up to someone's door, to ring the doorbell, to drop some lit, and then just like disappear into the night or day. I just thought that was really fun. And then when I was in high school, and this is of course going to date me a little bit, when I was in high school, 9/11 happened, and I got very involved in anti-war advocacy and protesting on my high school campus. So we organized, I was involved in a group called Students for Peace and Justice. We didn't have like a Young Dems chapter or anything, but I was involved with Students for Peace and Justice, which organized like walkouts and protests against the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. So that was sort of what first piqued my interest was, and this was, the early 2000s, which is when this was obviously before Twitter, Facebook, before most social media. So people would have these long debates on like internet forums. And so that was sort of where I first got a taste for arguing with people on the internet about politics. And so then after that, it just sort of made sense. I went to community college before I transferred because I wasn't sure what I wanted to do after high school. And I went to community college and it just sort of fit. I went to my first like political science class and I was like, oh, this makes total sense. I should definitely be a political science major. And I eventually ended up transferring to UCLA, where I was a political science major and my focus was international relations because, like I said, my sort of introduction into politics was international stuff. And of course, I don't work in the international space. Basically, since I graduated, I've worked on campaigns. But that was sort of my first my first interest and what really got me into politics was sort of the international side. And being, you know, a hippie pacifist from California.
Okay.
You're repping the California reputation very well.
Exactly. I'm the stereotype.
No, that's fantastic to hear so many different influences that have created your path for you. It's really cool to hear that you grew up in such a union family. You know, we've been talking to people about the unions and trying to like breathe life back into them and try to get young people engaged in them, and to be raised in them that way, where that was just part of it. That's so fantastic.
Yeah, it's a different than what many people like. Many people do not even know about the unions till they're needed or till something happens.
Yep. I mean, especially people from our generation, I feel like it's not quite, I mean, because unfortunately, you know, with right to work states, and all that, like union membership is declining, but unions are the reason that we used to have a really strong middle class. And my dad would always say, like, because my dad always encouraged all three of my siblings and I to go to college. He never went to college, but he was like, I don't want you to think that just because I have a job where I'm able to financially support my family, that means that you shouldn't also go to college. So he really like encouraged us to still go, because he knew that unfortunately union jobs are on the decline, and nowadays it might not be possible to, you know, work a full-time union job and have that be enough to raise a family, at least in California.
No, that's the case. You know, it's right now in Michigan, it's hard to find union jobs. There's a lot of people who are working part-time jobs. They don't qualify to unionize. And it's just, like you were saying, it's just harder right now to find one solid job that is going to be enough to last for you and your family. Most people that I know in my age range are working at least 2 jobs. Some of them are working 3 to 4 jobs. So, it's an issue. It really is.
And with that, you know, it's like, okay, I made enough money to pay for everything, but then, you know, you sacrifice your mental health, you sacrifice your physical health. And then, like, especially with when you're working like so many jobs and you don't have insurance from the company or anything like that, then all your money, basically, you're working all those jobs to pay for your health. And our whole system it's
a circular system that continues problems.
Yeah, my mom was a 3rd generation like infant caregiver. Like she works with babies and she's also a preschool teacher. And that is one of the that is a very, very low paid job. And unfortunately not a job that is unionized. And so like there was times when I was growing up that my mom would be working 3 jobs and, you know, none of them would be full-time jobs. So she still wouldn't have insurance. So she would be working, you know, and that's like, she was working with like one family. She was a nanny for one family that had 2 children with special needs. She also worked part-time at like another preschool. And then she was another, like, so she had all these I mean, maybe I'm biased, but I think that working with children is a very important job and one that needs to be celebrated more. And so, you know, I just think it's really telling that a lot of these jobs that rely specifically on women's labor are seen as being less than and seen as, you know, not being worthy of actually making a living wage.
Yeah. No, it's a cultural argument right now. It really is. And, you know, I think about, like you said, how important it is for childcare. That's literally the future of our country, of our nation, of the world. And we just don't seem to feel that they need a living wage and prioritize supporting them in the same way.
Yeah. And it's not only, I mean, like speaking about that, there's a lot of people who want to spend like time with their kids, like at home when they're first, you know, there, but at the same time they need the jobs. And it's like, okay, so I get a job and keep my kids with a babysitter or a daycare, so you miss out on that time and all your money is going to that. But at the same time, they can't just sit at home and take care of their kids or be with their kids.
Yeah,
it's like we really need maternity and paternity leave, but mainly like, you know, maternity leave for everyone. But like we really have to work on just getting you know, both parents being able to have that luxury, that, well, it's not even a luxury, it's something that is essential. It's a necessity to be able to stay home with their kids in the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. And unfortunately, it always ends up being more of the woman's responsibility, or like, you know, it's assumed to be our responsibility. And, you know, it's something that I think about every day, and something that most of my female friends that want children think about every day is like, how will I don't think I'll be able to quote unquote have it all. Like, how will I ever balance having a family with having a job. And it's unfortunate. It's a huge way in which I know everyone says America is the greatest country in the world, but like this is one example where we are really, really lacking.
Yeah, we're failing in this area. We really are.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just in total, just between the health, between making sure that we have, you know, the necessities for the kids at this age, and so that there is no decline like down the line. But we're just missing a lot of the essentials, especially around the youth. And then that, like, by the time, you know, you get older and start wanting to be out on your own, there's a lot of things that you either don't know or was just missing. No matter like how hard your parents try and your like family tries, that's just the way our politics are. I mean, everything circles back to like healthcare. Everything circles back to politics.
Yep.
It really does. And so that's why, you know, you'll hear people say, well, I just don't do politics. And that is one of the things that just drives me absolutely crazy. Because whether you realize you're doing politics or not, you're doing politics.
Yeah. Everything is political.
Yeah, you are living politics every day. And if you're just not engaged in it, well, I guarantee you everyone else that's probably hurting you in some way, shape, or form has been involved in politics. And you just not have anything to do with it is one of the most frustrating things you hear on doors or in phone calls, because it's literally working against your own self-interest. And if we could just get people to get engaged in politics, realize that they already are engaged in it, and maybe they should be utilizing that some way. I think we can see a big difference.
Because everything, you know, the way we work, our work hours, all of that, health, everything is intertwined with politics in some way. Definitely. Until we have a big change in the political system and basically get rid of the two-party system and actually have representatives who represent the people in a sense, and not just the party. We're a long way from there.
We still have so much work to do, but that's why I'm still in the fight, is because I know, like, I am an optimist at heart, even though that's probably ridiculous. Like, I believe that, you know, we can achieve these things. It's just, it takes it takes a lot of work. So it is like, I am involved in politics because I want to make the world better. I want things to be fair for the people that don't have as much as everyone who does, like you said, care about politics, because they're trying to protect their bottom line or protect their power.
Exactly. So I'd love to hear a little bit about what it was like as a high schooler organizing those marches and protests. You know, something that we do right now in Michigan, we're really prioritizing reaching out to high schoolers and trying to set up chapters in high schools. And what we have found is you have a few engaged high schoolers here and there, but everyone's very decentralized, so no one's really united. And so, like, it's really hard to get groups going. It's hard to get movements going. What was that like, being a high schooler organizing such important demonstrations?
It was, because like I said, we'd never had like a high school Dems chapter or anything like specifically partisan on our high school campus. My best friend, actually, who is the current president of the California Young Dems, she was involved in the high school Dems when she was in high school. But we just never had one of those chapters. So it was like, we kind of worked with like one of our history teachers and a civics teacher to really organize a walkout. It was a walkout that we did the day that we invaded Iraq. And I was in high school, I was like a huge, my nature is I'm Hermione Granger, and that, like, I'm a teacher's pet. I was a very, like, prided myself on being a good student and not breaking the rules. I didn't even drink alcohol until I turned 21. So for me to like walk out of class was like a huge deal for me, because I was, you know, I had all this guilt about like being a good student and everything. But it was actually one of my English teachers for like my favorite English class. It was the march was supposed to be starting that morning, and he basically excused us all from class and said, you know, this is more important than this Shakespeare play that we're reading. I think everyone needs to like, and so that, I mean, I do consider myself very lucky in that I grew up in a community like Santa Cruz, and a lot of our teachers were like former hippies. And so it was like, we were lucky to have a lot of support from people, but it was actually like a really beautiful, it was really my first protest. I mean, I went to a few like union marches and stuff with my dad when I was a kid, but it was really my first protest that I like felt like I had a stake in. And so that I remember still like painting a giant peace sign on my face with lipstick. And then I had like, cause I had a job in high school. And so I had to like go to my job after school, and like, I couldn't get the peace sign fully like wiped off my face. And my brother was making fun of me, but no, it was actually, I think something like 75% of our class walked out, and participated. And we had like we had some like people come up and do poetry, people that came up and did like prayers, like not like non-denominational prayers, and just like moments of silence. I mean, obviously this was in 2003, so this is 18 years ago, but I still have such a like strong, like visceral memory of that moment. And it was just really beautiful. And of course, since then I've been to a million more protests, but that was like my first one. And it really made like a positive impact on me. I saw I mean, obviously we were all like high school kids, so it was very peaceful, and just respectful. But yeah, it was definitely a task to try and like organize it. I was not quite as involved directly in the organizing aspect of it, although I was a member of the group. But it was scary. Like just the thought for me of like walking out of my class was like terrifying to me, which says everything about what I was like in high school. But no, I was really like, I'm really glad that I did it. It was obviously something that I cared very strongly about. At the time, like I felt like I was so knowledgeable, like just because I was following the news like so closely. And so I think that unfortunately is how sort of so many folks got galvanized. And I think, you know, there may have been something similar after Trump was elected. Obviously that was way after my time in high school, but you know, just I think unfortunately when there is some big negative rallying cry for us to all focus on, that for better or for worse leaves people to kind of radicalize. At least that's how it was for us. And obviously we all were impacted by 9/11, and that was like something that changed. I mean, I was 15 when 9/11 happened, so it's still like, you know, was something that sits with me. And I think that really kind of was the impetus that we needed to really see, oh, there is like scary shit going on in the world. There is stuff going on outside of this, you know, high school. We need to figure out how we're going to play a part in that, for better or for worse.
Yeah, most definitely.
No. Yeah, so just before we go on, you're watching Dive into Young Politics with Leah and Zahara, live streaming on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter, and other top social media platforms. Please like, follow, share, comment, and subscribe. Thank you for watching WJZZ Cool TV, the coolest station in the world.
Yeah, I you know, it's unfortunate that it usually takes a negative sort of catalyst to bring everyone together. You know, there's this saying that you see people at funerals and weddings. So like it usually takes like either a really positive thing that we're all getting together for, and even then it's harder, I think, to drag people out. And then when there's a negative thing that we have to stand up against, that's usually when I think you see people come out in droves.
Yeah, and I think like that's what I say like came from 45's presidency, is that it woke a lot of people up, and it made people start, you know, looking at things and getting involved in them.
Yeah, some of the newer young Dems in the state of Michigan actually got involved because of the Trump presidency.
Yep.
They were high schoolers during it, and they saw what was happening. And as soon as they got out of high school, they started reaching out, going, "Okay, now like what do I do? Like I'm on my own now. I can make my own choices. Like how do I change what's happening?" And again, it sucks that we had to have such a negative, nasty scenario be what woke people up. But we have seen at least for us in Michigan, and I'm pretty sure it's similar throughout the nation. I can't give you statistics, but we've seen volunteer numbers go up, we've seen actions go up, engagements go up. Like people really did wake up for woke up. And
yeah, because people, I mean, no one thought that it was possible. No one thought that he was going to win. Like I still feel bamboozled because no one was expecting it, and it feels so like naive to say that now. But I still like, I don't ever want to feel the way that I felt that night, the night that Trump won. I don't ever want to feel that way again. And so it's like, I think people that weren't super invested in politics beforehand saw that as well, and were like, oh shit, this is. And the scariest thing too is that we are by far not out of the woods. And I worry that people, because Biden is in office now, I just don't want people to get complacent and think, because Trump may be out of office, but unfortunately Trumpism is still alive and well and killing people. So it's
and he woke up a lot of like or he basically, in a sense, gave permission to a lot of those people to come out. And
Yep.
and it's like weird because some of the people that you saw doing some of the things, it's like people you associated with, people you were friends with, and it was a whole new, like, it's like you read about this in the history books and now you're actually living it. And that's a lot of what Trump's presidency was like. When we sit around and think, like, how did all this stuff happen before? And it's like, oh, okay, now I understand.
Yeah, yeah. And we're still dealing with the repercussions of some of those executive orders that he did.
Yeah.
And, President Biden's been undoing a lot of it, like rejoining the Paris Climate Accords, for instance, because apparently that was an issue. But, so like slowly we're undoing a lot of those executive orders and a lot of the damage, but there is a divide in the country. And so when it comes to organizing, I think like for us, like we're having a lot more frank conversations on doors with people, and we're having a lot more frank phone calls. And sometimes they're pretty negative interactions, and sometimes it's surprising what people are okay with saying now.
Yeah.
And that's been a weird adjustment for me.
Yeah, and I think like it also showed the flaw in the system with the electoral college and like all of that stuff and the way and how so many of the states are so heavily gerrymandered that it plays such a big effect into who gets elected and how people get elected and how people are represented. And I think so many people are starting like to pay attention and learn about this stuff in the past few years.
Yeah,
because it can really feel scary and feel like you don't actually have a voice. And sometimes that is the hardest thing to push back on when people say, like, what's the point in voting? What's the point in getting involved when it's never gonna like my vote doesn't matter. And it is like, it's so hard to hear that from people because I don't disagree it's like, it is hard to know that Hillary Clinton got 3 million more votes and still was not president because of the electoral college. That it's the same thing that happened, although a wider margin in 2000. And I always think about what a different path our country would have been on if Al Gore had been elected and instead of George W. Bush. But it is like, it's so hard to hear, especially from young people, well, my vote doesn't matter. My opinion doesn't matter. My voice doesn't matter. It's like, that's what they want us to think. That's what they want. They want us to not know or understand the power of our voices. They want us to feel helpless.
Yeah. And but at the same time, just with everything that happens, it's understandable when people don't vote in the presidential election. But that's why I tell people, like, okay, but your local elections can be determined by just a few votes.
Yes, absolutely.
Like, if you don't want to vote in the the presidential and some of the bigger elections, I get it. I understand. I feel that way sometimes, even though we volunteer and we get out and vote. I feel that. But your local elections can literally be determined by just a few votes, and that can make a big difference.
Yeah, some local elections here were about a 20-vote margin in the primaries between, a really progressive candidate getting on and a conservative candidate getting on. Some of our ballot initiatives in Pontiac, cannabis for being in the city passed by one vote.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so there was one person that said yes to having dispensaries, and that one person was the one that got them over the finish line to get the okay to put dispensaries in the city. So like it really, it's not to say that I'm ignoring like federal level stuff, but it's really been a huge focus to be able to get people engaged in local stuff, because that's really when I think people are going to be able to look at the numbers and go, wow, my vote actually mattered.
Yeah, that's what and I think once you start getting involved with the local stuff, you'll be like, okay, we're ready to change this. Like, we can change this, so let's work on bigger stuff. And I think that's how you you start.
Yeah, because the local stuff has the most immediate impact on us.
Yeah.
It's exactly like opposite of how important people think the various like levels of government are. The most local, it impacts you the most. In my experience.
Yeah, no, and I think most people would agree with that.
Yeah, and then even if you don't want to get involved with like voting for some or on someone's campaign, there's a lot of issues that come up. I mean, like I got my start in politics because of the cannabis issue. That's literally how I started. Like before that, I used to vote, but I wasn't really involved. It was the cannabis that got me involved in things and took me on a whole new path.
Yeah.
Cannabis, that's my gateway to politics. That's what I always say.
Yeah. So, well, you with your involvement, thank you for handing me the phone. What was it like being the executive president of YDA? Everything that you've done, how did you get to that point, and what was it like? And then where do you want to see that org go in the future now that you've kind of handed it off to the new leadership?
I'm very glad to be retired. I'll say that. No, but I never saw myself as running for a national YDA office. I remember at my first YDA convention, which was 2013, seeing everyone that was running for national office and thinking that could never be me. Because I have anxiety. I have, I just never saw myself as being that type of a leader. So it was really other people asking me. And, there is a statistic that women need to be asked, I think it's like 7 times before they'll consider running, whereas men will just like offer to run. They'll just who cares?
Oh I feel that. Like it took a while. I mean, for me to be able to feel like I can get involved, but it was through the whole, cannabis thing that I did.
I'm glad people asked you and bugged you for you to run.
Well, the first time I was asked, I said no. Actually, the first 2 times I was asked, I said no. And then Joshua did finally ask me to be his EVP, and I thought about it. I went back, talked about it with my therapist, and then I agreed that I would do it. And for me, it's always been just wanting to make the organization a better, more sort of welcoming place, because I have a background as someone that is, I'm a survivor, and I try to lead I try to lead with empathy, which I think is unfortunately something that is not always found in political spaces. And so I am told that is why I was asked to. I still feel weird like saying positive things about myself, but that I'm told that's why they wanted me to be part of the slate. And I hope that obviously when we all ran, no one knew that COVID was around the corner and we were all about to go virtual for everything. And so I think, unfortunately, there are things that like I didn't get to do because we couldn't physically be together. But I am still very proud of YDA for the things that we were able to accomplish virtually. Like, we had a lot of listening sessions and panels. We brought a lot of speakers to the group via Zoom. We had 3 virtual meetings. And I think, and of course we helped a lot with outreach in leading up to the election. And a lot of that has to do with our partnership with Women's March Action and something that a couple of our wonderful board members worked on last time. Terry Chapman and Kristen Hebrard were both very, very important in that effort. And I think I would just like to see YDA continue to get input from its chapters. YDA is only as strong as its chapters. I think YDA is a great, like the way that I see YDA, and it's also how I saw California Young Dems as it comes to like the local chapters, it is a mechanism for connecting people. It's a mechanism for allowing states to share best practices and to learn from one another and to help each other. And I think that is where YDA can do the most good. And I have a lot of confidence in the new team. I'm really excited to see what they're going to do. I've already heard amazing things. I trust Quentin a lot. He's been involved in YDA even longer than me. And, he just wants what's best for the organization. Like I have seen him spend hours of his weekend, like tweaking the rules and other stuff that people will not always like see them. Like people don't always see that as being like the sexiest part of YDA, but I have a lot of faith in the new leaders. I think that they're going to continue to do great things. And I also hope that we are able to work in a lot of these virtual aspects, even after COVID is over, which hopefully will happen at some point.
At some point.
At some point, if people just get vaccinated. I think that it was really good in terms of accessibility and, even just from a financial standpoint, like it helped me a lot to not have to pay to travel to YDA meetings, several times during the biennium. So I do think it's important to offer those options. And I think that's something that the pandemic has made people see throughout like multiple aspects of society.
Yeah, for sure. And it's like, once again, like people that they can't drive or they can't get to places for multiple reasons, health, not being able to afford it, or having a car but not be able to afford insurance, work. Like that's I mean, I'm lucky. I have like, my family and like people like Leah and my friend Colin that like, usually pick me up and take me places. But like not being able to drive, especially in a state like Michigan, is like, yeah, you can't do anything.
Yeah, I don't drive either, so I understand.
It's a hard. I mean, I'm working to get my license. One of these days.
Yeah, one of these
One
days.
of these days.
One of these days.
The virtual aspect of stuff, something that like for YDA to be able to switch over to doing everything virtually as like a huge national organization and how successful they were able to do it was very impressive. But I'm glad that you mentioned continuing that because of the accessibility, because outside of like financial costs and getting there, there's a lot of people with disabilities that are involved in YDA, and so like that's an extra struggle for them to be able to get there. And me and Ethan and Rob here in Michigan, we were talking about it for the next national committee meeting. We were saying, well, what happens if it's in California? We can't get to California, and so like without that virtual option, like we're just going to have to send proxies, and and then we're not engaged in the discussion. We're not engaged in what's happening, but we're there's that financial burden for me or that work burden for me. And if it's virtual, it's going to be much more accessible for me to be able to be like, oh, I can at least make part of this meeting today.
Yeah.
And I think that the pandemic has shown us how many people want that virtual access.
Yep.
We've got city council and county commissioner meetings that are now streamed live. And like the amount of engagement that we're seeing with these is amazing. It's so much more than we saw when they were in person, I feel like, because people are able to watch them. They're able to engage with them online. They're commenting. They're calling in to say things.
Yeah.
And I think people are more comfortable in that mannerism too, because they're not necessarily standing up in front of everybody, but they're able to like speak up in like the comfort of their own home. So people first getting involved, I've seen them be like a lot more confident on these virtual meetings. So like I'm hopeful that we continue having the virtual access for YDA, for county commissioners, for city council, and I think that it would be in our best favor to continue that.
Yeah, and I think there's obviously some stuff that, yes, you're going to need to be in person, or at least like the leadership team needs to be in person. Obviously, there is going to be those instances, but there's a lot of stuff that, did not need a 1 hour in person or 2 hour, 3 hour in person meeting.
Yeah.
Definitely. And I really just the accessibility to information, I think, is is a huge thing, because especially when we've had virtual meetings for our electeds, it being something that people can go and watch again instead of having to read a really lengthy report or ask so-and-so what happened at the meeting, and then you hear it from she said, he said, they said. That's changed the game, and it's also holding our electeds more accountable, because more people are seeing what they're saying in the meetings, what they're saying online. And so there's this accountability level that we now have too, which I think is a really awesome thing.
Hopefully we'll continue like doing these changes and pushing for this stuff moving forward, because accessibility, not being able to all of that plays a big role into who votes and how to vote. Look at Michigan getting the absentee ballot, like where everybody can vote absentee, I think is going to continue to drive people to vote.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Right now we're in the middle. California is in the middle of a stupid recall of our governor. And everyone just got mailed their ballot, period. And I just think that needs to be the norm moving forward. It makes it so much more convenient to know, oh, this is just going to be set. Like I just filled it out at home and then dropped it in the mailbox. Like it's so much easier. And obviously all these Republicans trying to cut down on it are not engaging in good faith. And I know it's shocking.
What?
I know. What? But no, I think it really is like one of those like things that is hopefully going to be a positive from the pandemic.
Yeah. We got to find our silver lining somewhere, right?
Exactly. That's the only way we're able to maintain like some form of sanity.
Yeah, I agree with that entirely. Most of it. Well, just as a reminder, everybody, you are watching Dive Into Young Politics with Leah and Zahara, live streaming on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter, and other top social media platforms. Like, follow, share, comment, and subscribe. Thank you for watching WJZZ Cool TV, the coolest station in the world. Sorry, my chair is squeaky.
I was wondering where that. I thought it was from outside. It's okay. Fun day. So, like we said, we just came back from a wonderful convention. where you were a convention chair, and you did a wonderful job. But what was that experience, and how was it different from your role on the board?
I think taking a lot of the stuff that I've been doing on the board has been sort of behind the scenes, in terms of just kind of like it's almost boring administrative stuff, like making sure that our officers' calls are happening, making sure that we are all in communication with each other, making sure that we all know what we're talking about when we do officers' reports at meetings, just the sort of stuff that goes on behind the scenes that is not super sexy or it doesn't rile up a crowd. So that's kind of been a lot of, and of course, because everything was virtual, a lot of what I've been doing as EVP is assisting with the planning and implementation of virtual stuff on the back end. And so it was nice to do something that was obviously a lot more front facing, like convention chair, where I really was like, that was never anything that I expected, was having sort of that much FaceTime with everyone. And it did sort of happen, not last minute, but our former convention chair stepped down about 6 weeks before convention. So we just needed to have someone take over. And I this was another situation where I did not think of it myself, but Jen House and Steph Wheaton, who were both also very involved in planning, suggested that I take over, which was a huge honor coming from them. But it was really fun. Like I was a little anxious just because, as I mentioned, like I get anxiety. I knew that it would be not an easy feat to sort of keep the room together. But I also saw it as being something that would play into my strengths. I think, in terms of like, I'm a Libra, so I like everyone to get along. And I'm like the eldest daughter of divorce, so I'm used to like uncomfortable arguing and in situations like that. So I was like, I actually am, I think, pretty good at making things, at like diffusing situations like that. So I was like, I think, I do kind of have, some might call it a bad habit, but of trying to like diffuse tense situations with humor. And that's something that I've always just done. And so I hope that came through during my time as convention chair, because I was, I know that it can be stressful. I know that it's like tense, that people are often like, engaged in intense elections. Like I ran 2 years ago. But I think it's important to have someone up there that can sort of keep the mood overall lighter. And so that was sort of what I was trying to do. And I hope it came through, and I hope I did a decent job. Because I know, getting people to quiet down is not always easy.
That's where the gavel comes in. Like,
the gavel had to come in. And I also feel bad too, because sometimes I can be one of those people, like I talk a lot, so I understand, like I can be one of those people in the audience that's like chatting, but yeah, I hope that everyone, I just hope everyone enjoyed themselves as much as possible.
Oh yeah.
No, it was really good. Yeah, but no, it is hard at times, especially like when you're seeing people like you haven't seen, or meeting people for the first time, like you've only known on Facebook. It's like, it's natural for you to start that conversation.
Exactly.
You forget your own rules at times.
I know.
Yeah. Well, and a room full of Dems from all over the place who are all campaigning, all running for seats,
all running for something.
Years.
Yep.
Yeah, controlling that room is difficult. So, like,
I know.
I think you said be quiet plenty of times. I think that you had the perfect measure of it.
I should have like pre-recorded myself saying "be quiet," and then I could have just like replayed it every time.
Yeah. So no, I think it's really cool to hear how you got in that position and like stepped up to convention chair. Like that is such a crucial part of just holding these meetings and getting stuff done, is to have someone who can kind of oversee it all. So like.
Yeah, and it was my 5th convention, so I sort of knew what I was getting into, what I can expect. But I actually, like, I had a lot more fun than I was anticipating. And I also, like, because of course I was a little bit anxious just about being in front of so many people. But I was like listening to an interview with someone, I can't remember if it was an actor or a musician, but they said that their like trick in terms of stage fright is when you start feeling nervous, tell yourself that you're excited instead, because it's the same type of like, it's the same like physical symptoms. So you can basically like trick yourself into being like, I'm not nervous, I'm just excited. And so that's basically what I did the entire time, was just, you know, whenever I would be like, oh my God, this is a lot of people looking at me. What if, like, you know, I could feel kind of the creeping of a panic attack coming on. And I would just tell myself, it's okay. Like, I'm just excited. You know, I'm so excited to get to be here and talk to everyone. So that was sort of my trick. Because it can be daunting, but overall, like, I thought it was fun.
No, that's a really good tip to use, because I mean, I get super nervous.
Yeah.
Speaking.
Believe it or not, she hates speaking in front of people.
Yeah, I am a public speaker, but yeah.
Yeah.
No, it can be scary. Like, I like public speaking as well, but sometimes you can just get over, like, out of nowhere. You'll just be like, oh my God, I can't do this. Like, I forgot how to form words.
Exactly. Or it's like, even if you have your speech written down, I'm like, I don't know what these words mean, or I don't know.
I know. Yeah, it can be terrifying.
Yeah. And it's like, they can be the same people, because like this happens to me at like some meetings. They can be the same people I'm in a meeting.
Yeah.
That I talk with, but then once you're right there, like the actual speaker or your listener, it's like it's a whole new thing, and I'm like, I don't know how to speak.
I've forgotten how to read.
Yeah, that's one of the things, because I also have like really severe anxiety and went through like a whole mental health thing, and that like plays a lot during like, you know, these big group meetings or places.
Yeah, especially when a lot of us haven't been in person in public in a long time.
Yeah. No, that's another element to it is, you know, at the same time that it might make you feel more confident talking through a computer, it's going to make it harder to go back to being in front of a crowd in person. And I really appreciate you, when we were at convention, being open about the fact that you're struggling with anxiety. I think everyone, there's this perspective that you're supposed to kind of have it all together to be leading things, and all together to be like the chair or the convention chair, or, you know, even to get involved sometimes. And I think it's more, everyone has a niche, and I think it's really important that they see themselves represented in leadership, and that they see leadership saying, I have the same struggles and the same issues as you, and I've been able to work on overcoming those. And like, that's, I think, so important, especially at a place like YDA, where you do have 16, 17, 18-year-olds who are just getting involved, who are just learning how to do having leaders that are open and real about what we're struggling with, instead of just talking about it as like statistics on a piece of paper, but instead it's really your story. I just wanted to tell you how much I appreciated you being so open about it and sharing that, because, you know, I do think we have members in our group who texted me today like, we're too nervous to give a nomination speech. And I'm like, don't worry, you don't have to, like, we'll take care of it. But I think like having those examples is so important for people to look up to and be able to see themselves. Like, I think that's really important.
Yeah, and that's why I talk about it, because I know, like, if anyone looks to me as being like a leader, which I was, you know, during that convention, unfortunately for everyone, just kidding. You know, it is good. I think it's so important to see yourself. And I mean, I started talking more about my own mental health stuff after Robin Williams passed, because he was such a larger than life, like, seemed like he was just like this funny, amazing guy, which he was, but he also dealt with a lot inside that wasn't always visible. And I always try and be a very positive, friendly, outgoing person, but I still struggle as well. In high school, people never believed that I was like painfully shy in high school. But I was, and like, it would be, you know, they would do like, whenever we would do like round robin reading, like people would read from like a book or whatever, I would like plan ahead and figure out where I was going to read, and then like go over it in my head, because I would be so nervous about like messing it up. And every time I would have to do that, like I would feel my voice shake. And it was just like the most terrifying thing to me. And so I just think like it is possible to overcome that. And even if you can't overcome that, you're still a valuable person, and you still have value within this organization.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, and that's definitely something, you know, we got to keep highlighting, because I think we've all, especially like, you know, these days, we've all, you know, struggled with it. Like, I've had my own struggle with depression and suicide. thoughts. And I think that stuff gets pushed away. And especially like when you're younger, like you have a lot of people who are like, well, what do you guys have to worry about?
Yep.
Or, you know, like all of that stuff. And it's like, there's a lot to worry about. There's a lot that's going on. There's a lot that's changing, a lot that's happening. And then for some people, it's, you know, that their health, that's like, that's what led me to become like that.
Yeah.
And those stuff are definitely things that we need to, you know, keep highlighting, keep talking about, keep bringing attention to.
Yeah, most definitely.
Oh, sorry.
No. I was just agreeing with Zahara. Yeah, go ahead, Carrie. What were you going to say?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important to see that among young people in particular. That's also why I talked about my sobriety, because it's not something that a lot of young people deal with or talk about. And I think now that I, like, because I am at a point in my life where I feel comfortable talking about it, I think I should use that for good and like let people know that they're not alone, because that can be the hardest part, is feeling like you're the only one that's struggling with something. And it's not true. It's not true. You know, and I have found a lot of solace in people reaching out to me saying, thank you for speaking about your mental health. Like, I struggle too. Or thank you for speaking about quitting drinking. I struggle too. Like, it's a mutually beneficial interaction, I think. And it's been really meaningful to me, and it makes me cry every time.
No, thank you. Thank you so much for doing that. But yeah, like you said, that can be an open, like one person speaking about it can be an open way for others to start speaking about it. I mean, I was surprised like a few years ago when I came out about my mental health and depression and suicidal attempt is the people who reached out and were like, you know, we've been afraid to talk about this, or even like say like, you know, thank you for speaking up. And that was a surprise, because I just did it because I saw so many people struggling and just wanted to show that, you know, we can do something about it. And it was, you know, that was just like a surprise to me how it happened.
Yeah.
Thank you for speaking about that. And I'm sorry that you also had struggled.
It's important to have this community that we have through YDA and through our local chapters, to have those people that kind of come around you in those moments. And that's something that, you know, we're fighting for every day, is to build these relationships with people so that they do have that community, so that they do have that support network, so that, you know, they're able to conquer these things that they're struggling with.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing I really like about our board at YDM is that, you know, we make sure that we pay attention to our mental health. Like, we've all at one point taken either a 2-week break, 2-month break, whatever, to deal with the struggles and to, you know, to get ourselves back on the right path. I think that's something that I really love about our board, is that we do take care of that, and we do highlight the need to be more proactive on taking care of ourselves, in the sense of, like, you know, our struggles and our health.
Yeah.
You can't pour from an empty cup.
Amen. You cannot pour from an empty cup. Gosh.
So, to get a little bit back on track. So, not that, I mean, that conversation we can talk about.
I know, but
having studied international relations, what are your views on the U.S. relationship with other nations, especially as it relates to, you know, the war is happening or trying to get out of, or something in a sense?
Yeah, and like, how does that affect your organizing?
Well, I mean, as I alluded to earlier, I am not a fan of war. Like, that is really kind of what, you know, spurred my own activism. And it was the same, like, just even learning about Vietnam growing up, I think really impacted me. And I mean, Afghanistan, what's happening in Afghanistan is very analogous to Vietnam, in my opinion. I just think the United States needs to not have the role of being America's policeman. And I think in general, the US trying to get involved in regime change or nation building, and I'm using quotes for all that, can be extremely problematic. And I think, unfortunately, I mean, just look at, and it's not only in the Middle East and Asia, like, look at Latin America. Everything that we have done in Latin America, almost everything we've done in countries has made their situation worse.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of strong feelings about diplomacy in general, but I do think that the United States has been responsible for so many problems in the rest of the world. And I say this as some, I'm saying this because I am patriotic, because I think that our country can and should do better. I think we have created so much pain and suffering and harm in the rest of the world, and yet we are so xenophobic, yet we are so anyone that claims that we need to lock down our borders is completely ignorant of the problems that the US has caused in so many of these countries. That's the reason why people are coming here from South and Central America. And so for me, like, I knew, like, because I don't really work in the international space, that's just where my education is. Like, that's what I studied in undergrad. I've thought, I think always about like going and working for the UN or doing something to do with international diplomacy, but I ended up just sort of going into campaigns, like, state and local campaigns, which is obviously completely different, but international politics is still something that I follow very closely. It's something that I think most Americans don't know enough about. But I can also, I also, of course, understand how daunting it can be and how scary it can be. But I do think that sometimes, folks are gatekeeping without necessarily needing to be. Like, I think a lot of people will say, oh, you shouldn't learn about this because it's just too complicated. And that always just sort of turns me off, because I feel like you can't, yes, of course, you shouldn't be speaking on something that you have no knowledge about, especially if it's something that you end up like defaulting to harmful tropes. But I think that we shouldn't be discouraging people from learning more about America's role in other countries. I think we should be doing the opposite. But yeah, that's just sort of like the 30,000 foot view of things. I did not think that the war in Iraq was justified. I did not think that us invading Afghanistan was justified. I do not think that the US should be bombing other countries. And people, it can be hard in mainstream democratic politics, because we're often called naive or uneducated for supporting passive, like peaceful situations, peaceful options first. But I don't, I've been called worse. If that's the worst thing you can say about me is that I want there to be less war, then I'm fine with that.
Right. Yeah, I'm sure you're doing something right.
It's when you're trying to do something positive, you get all the negative. It's like, okay.
And it's unfortunately a lot of, it's a double-edged sword, kind of, because a lot of it comes from men, who, especially when women are seen as supporting something that is, heaven forbid, not violent and aggressive, then right. that's something that's the fault of us, apparently.
It's like you're going too soft, or okay, you can't be a female in this, or like
heaven forbid. Yeah. So it's I still remember after 9/11, everyone was putting the American flag decals on their cars, and everyone was flying the American flag. And I still remember asking my dad, why don't we have an American flag on our car? And he was like, because a lot of the people that are putting American flags up, they just want war. And at the time I was like, what is he talking about? And then sure enough, 6 months later, like, that's exactly what happened. And so I think for me, a lot of my like activism and sort of, especially regarding international stuff, is because of my dad. My dad is very much into history. And so he has always been very, encouraging of me to study history as well. I read like Howard Zinn in middle school. And, my dad has been very good about encouraging me and my brother and my sister to sort of question authority and question what we are told and question kind of the status quo. And so I am very grateful to him for that, because now he has this daughter that's ornery and like questions everything and makes a stink out of things. So I'm sure he's very proud.
That's fantastic.
That's really good to hear.
Well, do you have any parting words of wisdom to our viewers before we leave here?
I mean, I think my biggest goal in being involved in Young Dems is just seeing more young people get involved and remain involved. I learned in my political sociology class in college that, if people vote 3 times, they become lifelong voters. And that has been what all I've wanted to do since my involvement in Young Dems is get more young people, but particularly young women, particularly young queer people, particularly young people of color, particularly young people with disabilities and mental health issues. I think, the more diversity that we're able to bring into the party, the better. And I think hopefully Young Dems everywhere, whether it's at YDA, whether it's at your state or local chapters, are doing what they can to push this party to be better, to have us be more inclusive, to have us be more progressive. Because I think that's the only way that we're going to ever come against everything that's trying to keep us down.
Yeah, I agree. I think those are great parting words of wisdom.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, Carrie, thank you so much for joining us today. We really enjoyed this discussion, getting to know you, getting to see YDA through your eyes, and a little bit about California too. So it's nice to learn.
You can come visit me in San Francisco anytime.
Awesome.
Oh, yeah, maybe our next trip should be there.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Carrie. We hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And
thank you so much for inviting me.
You're welcome. Bye.
Bye.